Hello, YouTube. YouTube viewers. My name is Luther, and what I'm going to be doing is starting a new series. It's a series of what I would call chats. They're just going to be talks. And they're going to be talks about a lot of different subjects, but it's all going to pertain to one of the main questions that I notice a lot of people ask. Now, sometimes they don't ask it explicitly. Sometimes it's more of this undergirding thing that people sort of try and find out about. But it's, is there any truth? Is there any truth anywhere? Is there anything that can be called true, or is it just relative? You have your truth, I have my truth, and, we just kind of get along just fine. Is that really the way things are? I mean, is that even possible? Is that really the way things can be? Can I have my own truth and you have your own truth? Can that exist? Well, I'm here to talk about that and a lot of other things. I want to get a few things out of the way. First off, yes, I am a Christian. I do what is called Christian apologetics, and what that is it's just giving a reasonable, evidential case for God's existence. Now, I'm not talking about giving some sort of evidence for the belief in God. There's a big difference between believing in something and that something existing, all right? Let's say me and you are going to go ice fishing, okay? And we get to the pond. It's frozen over, but there's a sign and it says, danger, thin ice, 1 inch. And you say, hey, let's turn around, let's go back. And I say, no. What are you talking about? We don't have to turn around. See, if you step out on that ice, you're going to fall through it. But me, I'm light as a feather. So if I step out on that ice, I'll be okay. And I'll be able to ice fish, and you're going to miss all the fun. That's my truth. I fully believe that I am light as a feather, and that if I step out on that ice, I'm not going to fall through it. I have total faith. Well, you know what's going to happen? If I step out on 1 inch thick ice, I'm going to fall straight through it, no matter how much faith I have, because I weigh about 180 pounds. So, yeah, I can believe that if I put my 180-pound self out on thin, 1 inch thick ice, that ice will hold me. But what does the evidence point to? Well, the evidence points to that won't happen. The evidence points to I'm going to fall straight through that ice. And I can't swim, so I'm really going to be in a bad predicament. And this is how law works. This is how science works. This is how true science works. We'll get to it when we get into science and things like that. But science itself doesn't say anything. Scientists do. They interpret the data. Do they fudge results? Yes, but again, we'll get to that. So what I want to tackle first is I want to tackle free will. It's a question that I hear a lot, and it almost always bumps up against God's sovereignty. An atheist would say, well, your God, talking to us as Christians, well, since your God knows everything, then how can I have a choice? And furthermore, how can I be held responsible for any choices that I make if your God knows everything? If he knows all this stuff, then how can I have free will? And the way that you're thinking about it in your mind, that makes sense. But when you try and play that out in practical reality, it doesn't pan out the way you're thinking about it. And that's what I notice with a lot of things, especially with evolution. The evolutionary theory, it makes sense in your mind. It makes sense. Hey, all animals came from a common ancestor, animals and humans. They all came from a common descent because look at this similarity and that similarity and this similarity over here. But when you start to dig deeper and actually do the research, practically it just doesn't work. It just doesn't. I mean, I'm stating from doing the research and following the evidence where it leads, it just doesn't pan out the way you think about it in theory. The reality does not match the theory that is provided. And it's the same thing with this. Free will. The reality of free will doesn't match the theory of free will. The theory of free will is we don't have it because God knows everything. And because he knows everything, we can't have it. But the reality of it is much different, and that's what I'm going to go through, at least in this chat here today. So what I want to start off with is I want to start off with two premises. The first premise is understanding free will. There's a lot of people that don't understand it. I mean, and one of my favorites is free will is an illusion. It's not really free will. I came across an interesting political cartoon. It's a political cartoon of it's a cow, and the cow's got two hallways that it can go down. One hallway to the left, one hallway to the right. The hallway to the left says Democrats, the hallway to the right says Republicans, or it's the other way around. I'm not sure which one is which, but either way, one of them is for one political group, one is for the other. But both hallways lead to the slaughterhouse. So it doesn't matter which one you go down, they both lead to the same place. And underneath the caption, or the meme, says, the illusion of free will. And I thought about that, and I was like, that's pretty funny. It's not accurate, but it's pretty funny. And people that don't dig any deeper than that will think that that's accurate. They'll look at it and they'll say, oh yeah, that's it. That's what free will is. It's a big illusion because any way I choose, I'm still darned. I can't really make any decisions because any way that I choose, it's gonna go the way it's gonna go. It doesn't really matter what I do. And then my second premise, so my first premise is going to be understanding those kinds of things. And my second premise is going to be on God's sovereignty. Because, again, that always bumps up against free will. People always take it there. Especially atheists. If your God knows everything, then how can we have free will? I saw an interesting video on YouTube, and it was, we have free will to do what God tells us. Using that as a contradiction. And, so I was thinking about that too, watching that video. And so I'm going to take these two premises just one by one and show evidence and try to explain this type of thing. So the first premise, understanding our free will. Do we have free will? But I suppose a better question would be, can we have free will? Is it even possible? Again, because God is sovereign. And if the Christianity claim is true and God really does know everything, then how can we have free will? Well, there's a short answer and a long answer to this question. The short answer is yes, of course. Of course we have free will. Everyone has free will. I freely chose to make this video, okay? I didn't have to. I could be surfing the internet right now. I could be playing video games. I could be out partying somewhere. I could be asleep, but I chose at this time to make this video. You chose to watch this video. You didn't have to. You could be doing the same things that I was doing, but you didn't. Instead, you're here watching this video of your own free will. Now, maybe somebody coaxed you into it. Maybe somebody said, hey, there's some guy on the internet. He looks pretty interesting. Let's watch him. Whatever. You still made the choice to sit down in front of your computer and venture to YouTube, and now you're watching this video. So yes, we make real choices that affect real people in real time. I could choose to beat my kids or my wife. I can make that choice. Now, that's a horrible choice, and I know the consequences that will come of that choice, but I could still make that choice. It's my choice. I could. You could make the choice to, when you wake up in the morning, to not get out of bed. You just lay there all day, 12 hours. You could say, you know what, nope, I'm not getting out of bed. I'm just going to lay here for the entire day. I'm going to urinate on myself. I'm going to go hungry. I'm not getting out of bed. Now, you know that's a very bad choice to make, of course, and you full and well understand the consequences of making that choice, but you could still make that choice. It would be a foolish choice, sure, but you could still make it. You could still do it. So, short answer, yes, of course we have free will. Everyone has free will. Now, for the long answer, again to the question, do we have free will or can we have free will? The long answer is yes, but our free will comes with a caveat. We are not completely autonomous. So our free will comes with limitations. There are certain choices that we simply cannot make. It's just the way, it's the nature of existence. There are certain choices and certain options we cannot choose. I'll go straight to the heart of it. Death. Death is something that no matter how many decisions you make in your lifetime, no matter how good you eat, no matter if you don't smoke, don't drink, exercise every day, you're gonna die. I'm gonna die. No amount of choices can stop death from happening. There's no amount of options that you can exhaust to stop your body from dying. I mean, hey, you could live to your 130. Guess what? You're still gonna die. So there's no amount of options that you can use to stop yourself from dying. Another choice that we can't make are things like gravity. If I go up to the Space Needle in Seattle, Washington, and I've got a bowling ball, and I drop it off the observation deck, as soon as I drop that bowling ball off the observation deck, my choices have ended. I cannot choose to say, okay, I'm going to drop this bowling ball off the observation deck, but instead of the bowling ball falling to the ground, it's actually going to float into the sky. I can't do anything with that. I can't make that. I can't make the choice against physics and say I choose to make the bowling ball go to the left and then go to the right and then fall down 5 feet and then go up 5 feet and then go northeast and then fall down again. No. My choices ended as soon as I dropped the bowling ball off of the Sky Needle in Seattle because of something called gravity. So I can't make a choice against that. Now, yes, there are certain places that you can go that there's less gravity or no gravity, and that I understand. But again, that's still all a choice that you made to go there and to do that. For the sake of argument, if you, just you, go to Seattle, Washington, you get up on the Space Needle, you're on the observation deck, and you throw the bowling ball over the edge, you cannot choose whether that bowling ball is going to fall to the ground or not. It will fall to the ground. You have no choice in that matter. But let's get a little more practical. Let's say you're speeding down the freeway, all right? Speed limit's 70 and you're going 95. You fly past a police officer. As soon as you go past that police officer doing 95, you cannot choose whether that police officer is going to flip on his lights and come after you. Your choices have ended. As soon as you went past him at 95, you can't choose anymore whether he's going to pursue you or whether he's going to try and pursue you. Your choices have ended. You can't choose that for him. Let's say you're a Supreme Court justice and you tell the officer, hey, look, I'm going to be going past you on your freeway and I'm going to be doing about 95. Don't come after me. Don't chase me. Don't pull me over, because if you do, any case you bring to my courtroom, I'm automatically going to throw it out. And guess what? The chief of police, you know, your boss, yeah, me and him have been buddies for quite some time. So I would recommend that you don't chase after me. That officer, so let's say, you know, you speed past him, he still flips on his lights, comes after you, pulls you over, you open your window and you're like, hey, don't you remember what I told you? And he's like, you know what, sir? You do what you have to do, and I'll do what I have to do. You're not above the law. And he hands you the ticket. See? You can't stop someone from making a decision. You can provide very strong influence for them not to make the decision. And you can let them know the consequences should they make the decision. But you cannot stop them from making the decision. Now, again, you can trap people and put them in certain places, and there are certain rules and things like chess. There are certain decisions that must be made, but then again, there are silly decisions that can be made. So even in that aspect, you can't necessarily push someone into this corner and say, well, you have to either choose A or B, because they could choose C. C could be absolutely silly and ludicrous, but they could still choose C. I mean, they could still do it. It would be ridiculous, you know, and it wouldn't make any sense logically to choose that option, but they could. So, again, we are not born completely as a law unto ourselves. Because there are certain things that hold us down, like time, like physics. We can't just make any choice we want to forever at all. No, we have free will. Yes, of course we do. Because the choices that we do make have real effects on real people in real time. And sometimes the choices that we make have effects on people for a lifetime. Like I was going back to the whole scenario about men abusing their spouses, and if I chose to abuse my spouse. Well, that's going to have a detrimental effect on my children, or on my one child, for his entire life. That's real. That's not an illusion. That's something that's real. It's really going to affect him. He's going to have real problems. These are not just going to be illusionary problems. No, this is something that actually happened. And this is a choice that I made. And that choice that I made affected him. It affected me. It affected my wife. So, just in summary, yes. Short answer, of course we have free will. Everyone does. But long answer, yes, again, we have free will, but our free will is limited. There are certain choices that we can't make. There are certain outcomes that we cannot control. And, and there are certain things that no matter how many choices we make, we can't stop them from happening. And again, death is one of the biggest. So now what I want to move on is what I want to move on to, and I hope that's understandable. Please put any comments below. Let me know if it was understandable, if you still have questions about it, if I didn't make any sense at all, what have you. That's fine. Put the comments below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. So what I want to go to now is I want to go to understanding how God's sovereignty works. Because if you now agree with me and understand that, regardless of whether you agree with me or not, if you've understood the line of evidence that I've provided to why we do have free will, now I'm going to move on to God's sovereignty. Now, God's sovereignty is, it's complex. There's no real other way to put it. It's complex. Before, when I was younger and I wasn't really a Christian, I used to kind of think that Christianity was sort of, that it was entirely brainless. You didn't think when you were a Christian. It was just sort of like, I have faith, and I just kind of have faith in whatever. But I found out it's not like that. It's not like that. When you dig deeper, you find out that it's actually pretty absurd to believe anything else, because everything else just doesn't pan out. God's sovereignty is complex in the way that there's 3 levels to it. And what I'm going to go through the 3 levels. I'm going to start with level 1, and then I'm going to go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with level 2, and then I'm going to go down to level 1, and then I'm going to move up to level 3, because level 3 gets a bit dicey. Level 3 is a little weird, and you really have to listen, because you may think that I'm going to say something that I did not say. So you've got to listen to me. Level 2 of God's sovereignty is His overarching sovereignty. Does God know everything that will happen? Well, yeah, He would be much of a God if He didn't. But what you've got to understand is that God not only knows all things that will happen, but He also knows all things that can happen. See, God knows all actual, but He also knows all possible. So just because something can happen does not mean that it will happen. There's a big difference, and that kind of goes into Murphy's Law. I was actually looking that up. And just doing some research on it. And Murphy's Law, it's stated pretty typically as anything that can go wrong will go wrong. There's a bunch of different types of Murphy's Law. Or Murphy's Laws, plural. But as the normal Murphy's Law, that's how it's stated. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But that's not necessarily true. That depends on whatever the item is that you're saying can go wrong. It depends on how many times you do that item. All right, let me give an example. All right, let's say, for instance, and I don't want to get too much off on a tangent, but I want to kind of drive this home. Let's say you're extremely wealthy, okay, and your wife tells you, hey, I want you to go to the store and get milk, eggs, and bread. You say, okay. You go to the store, you get milk, you get eggs, you get bread, you get the exact kinds you want, you come back home, easy, it's done. Nothing went wrong. Nothing. As a matter of fact, everything went right. It was perfect. Now let's say you never in your entire life go to the store ever again. Let's say that is the only time that you ever visit the store in your entire life. Every single other time, butlers do it, someone else does it. That means that in that situation, in that sphere, nothing went wrong and nothing will ever go wrong for you going to the store. Because you've only gone one time in your entire life and nothing went wrong. You see what I mean? So it depends on the situation. It depends on how many people are involved. It depends on what you're doing. Have you done it before? Do you only have to do it once? Are you going to do it numerous times throughout your life? You know, are you new at it? How dangerous is it? How risky is it? How much money does it take? All these factors come into play. So getting back to the main point about God's sovereignty, God knows everything that can happen, but he also knows everything that will happen. And anything that can happen will not necessarily happen. So God knows all the choices that I'm going to make. That doesn't mean I have to make those choices. No, he just knows all the possibilities. So he says, okay, Luther has choice A and B in front of him. Now he could make choice A, and this is all the possibilities and everything that goes with choice A. But he could also make choice B. And I know that too. And these are all the possibilities that go with choice B. So whether he makes choice A or B, I still know, but it's still his choice. He can go to A or B. That's like my wife, okay? My wife really enjoys steak, okay? And when we go out to eat, most of the time, she's going to want to go for steak. We're going to go to the Cheesecake Factory. She wants steak. We're going to go to Applebee's. She's going to want steak. I know that. Now, she also likes fried chicken. So I could say to her, okay, well, hey, look, babe, do you want to go, do you want to go out to eat? Now, I know that 9 times out of 10, she's going to choose steak. I know that. But that does not mean that I control her choice. Because she could just easily say, you know what? I feel like chicken tonight. She could. I know both of these things are on the menu, and more than likely she's going to choose one of them. But that doesn't mean I control that, and that doesn't mean it automatically strips her of her choice. She still has the option to do it. And that's how God's sovereignty works. God's overarching sovereignty is he knows everything that you're going to do. So you can't ever ruin his plans because there's already an infinite... Let me try and say this right. There are an infinite number of logistical contingencies that God already knows. So he already knows the infinite number of logistical contingencies that you could make to deviate from his plan. So if God says, hey, I want you to do A, and you say, nah, I'm not going to. First, God already knew that you weren't going to. Secondly, you didn't ruin his plan by saying, no, I'm not going to. The only thing you did was forfeit your responsibility to become part of that plan. That's it. Didn't ruin it. God's still going to get done what he needs to get done, whether you choose to go with him or not. And that feeds into level 1. Level 1 is our responsibility in God's sovereign plan, because we do have a responsibility. If God says do A, and you're like, no, I don't want to do A, well, hey, that's fine. You're going to miss out. God's still going to get his stuff done. He's still going to get done what he needs to get done. You haven't ruined his plan by saying no. No. All you've done is you're not going to reap the benefits of going with his plan. That's all. But he's still going to get done what he's going to get done. Your responsibility does not kill his sovereignty. It just doesn't do it. You're not strong enough to affect his sovereignty. You can't do that. Whatever you do, he already knew about it. You said no, he was like, okay, I already knew. It's up to you. You can say yes, you can say no. I already knew you were going to say no. And there are already an infinite number of contingencies in place just for you to say no. Now, if you say yes, hey, awesome. we can get going right away. But if you say no, the only one it's hurting is you. Not me. It's just hurting you. That's it. It's because you're not going to become part of this. And if you don't care, you don't care. Hey, it's up to you. God gives you your choice. He gives you your option. It's completely up to you whether you want to follow him or whether you don't want to follow him. Whether you want to believe he exists or whether you don't want to believe he exists. That's up to you. There are plenty of people that don't believe he exists. Plenty of them. And there are plenty of people that do. Again, we're following the lines of evidence. So that's level 2. Level 2 is God's overarching sovereignty, which means he knows all actual and all possible. So, and also there's a third kind of caveat to this, is that knowing all actual does not mean he causes everything to happen. Now, I hope that was implied, but just in case it's not implied, I want to mention it up front. Just because he knows everything that will happen does not mean he causes everything to happen. That's a big misunderstanding, and especially in the Bible, a lot of people that read the Bible out of context, which is most atheists, all atheists, that take the Bible out of context, they always go to that. They say, well, look, the Bible's full of slavery and polygamy and this and that and the other. Well, yeah, it is, but what you have to understand is that the Bible is a story of people, and these people make bad choices. That doesn't mean God condones these things or promotes these things. No, he permits them to happen, but he does not promote them, nor does he decide for these people. These people make their own choices, and it's recorded. The reason that those kinds of things are recorded are so that you can see that people make their own choices and they make bad choices, but God still chooses to use these people that make these bad choices, because he's the only one that can pull good out of these bad choices. Now, that's a little confusing, and I'll have to get into that later. It doesn't mean that you go around making a bunch of crappy choices and you're like, well, I'm just doing God's work. No, you made crappy choices of your own will, and you're going to be held accountable for that, because you made those choices. That's what we've been discussing this entire time. So now what I want to do is I want to move to level 3. And level 3 is a level that a lot of people, like I said, it gets kind of dicey because it's a little peculiar. What God does is God sometimes directs our free will to suit his purposes. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, no, then that just means he's controlling us. Let me give you a practical example of direction of free will. I'm going to go back to my wife. I know that my wife enjoys steak. I know that most of the time she's going to want to eat steak. Now, that is her choice. Again, she could not. She could go for chicken. Let's say I go up to her and I'm like, hey, babe, there's this new steak place. Would you like to go try it? Because I really want to eat steak. See, tonight, I really want to eat steak. And so I'm like, hey, babe, there's this new steakhouse. You want to go? And she's like, I'm on board. Let's go. You see, what I've done is I've directed her free will to suit what I wanted. I didn't force her, because she could have easily said, you know what? That new steakhouse sounds good, but I kind of want chicken this time. She could have. She could have said that. But she didn't. Instead, boom, right on board. Yes, we're going. Let's go eat steak. That's what God does, but God does it perfectly. God knows where you're going to go. He doesn't guess. He knows what choice you're going to make given any situation. And so there are times, and he'll use certain people. There are 2 examples in the Bible that I want to get into, and I'll leave the passages underneath in the comments section so that you can read them for yourself. I don't want to go through a whole bunch of biblical text with you. If you really want to know about these things, you'll read them yourself. One of the passages is God's judgment on Assyria, and it's in Isaiah 10, I believe. And what it is basically God is saying that Assyria is, well, I'll just read it for you. It says, woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. He, speaking of Assyria, or the Assyrian nation. This is not what he intends. This is not what he has had in his mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. So, in English, basically what he's saying is, I'm going to use Assyria, this is God talking, I'm going to use Assyria to do what I want to do with them. And this is not what they intend to do. Basically what God is doing in this passage, in context, is he's sending Assyria to judge Israel. And then he's going to hold Assyria responsible for that. So he's sending Assyria to judge Israel, and then he's going to hold Assyria responsible for doing what they did against Israel. And people would look at that and say, well, that's unfair. How can you fight against God? If he wants you to do something, you're going to do it. No questions asked. How can you fight against that? Well, you can't. But in this example and in this aspect, he is not forcing, because right after he says, I'm going to send him, meaning the Assyrian or Assyria, as a people group, as a nation, I'm going to send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder and trample them like mud in the streets. And it says, but he does not intend to do that himself. But a little bit later, he says his purpose is to destroy and put an end to many nations. Basically, the king of Syria has destruction on his mind. And he's already ready to destroy whomever he's going to destroy, to do whatever he wants to do. It's already on his mind. It's already in his thought bank. It's already there. God is not going to take someone like me and bring me all the way to the other side of the spectrum and say, okay, Luther, I know you like peace and I know you like to be a peaceful guy. Guess what? I'm going to make you go on a killer rampage. No, that would be overriding free will. That would be overriding free will. In this aspect, he's not overriding free will. He's directing the free will that this king of Assyria has already shown for decades, that he's into this. He's into pillage and plunder. That's what he's into. And it's been his choice for this entire time. And God is like, okay, well, guess what? I'm going to use your free will choices, and I'm going to direct them towards Israel instead. That's all. You're still going to be seizing plunder and pillage. You're just going to be doing it in the way I want you to do it. So it's not, I'm going to override your free will and make you do something I want you to do. No, it's, you're already into this. This is already a choice. This is already a choice you've been making for decades. I'm just going to move it from you taking care of whatever other country you're taking care of to Israel. That's it. So all I'm moving is the destination. But you're still making your own choice about what you want to do and what you've been doing for decades. Again, I go back to my wife and the steak versus the chicken. I say, hey babe, you want to go to a steakhouse? And 9 times out of 10, I know she's going to say yes. I didn't override her free will. I didn't make her go. I just know that that's something she normally wants to do, that she normally has the tendency to do that, and this time I want it to happen too. Therefore, I'm going to bring that to her and say, hey, do you want to? And more than likely, she's going to say, yes, sure, I do. So, now I don't know if you followed all that. Again, you can replay this video, put comments below, ask me questions about these things. That's fine, what have you. So, just in summary, I kind of want to go over the evidence that we looked at. We looked at our free will, and we looked at the 2 premises, which was understanding our free will and understanding God's sovereignty. Our free will is made up of, yes, we have real choices, but they are limited. And God's sovereignty is made up of the 3 levels that I went over. I want to end by giving an invitation. The world as we know it right now is changing a whole lot. And now I'm 32, but I remember back when, man, I was, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, 20. There are things that we can do now that we could not do back then. I mean, I'm talking about items of technology. I'm talking about items of science, items of exploration. But also with that brings a whole lot of other side effects that are unforeseen. The world is growing into a morally relativistic playground. If you've ever heard of the rock band Mindless Self-Indulgence, that's what the world is growing into. It's growing into mindless self-indulgence. It's growing into whatever you want to do it. If it feels good, if it sounds good, if it tastes good, if it looks good, do it. The moral implications, don't worry about those. Those don't matter. And they do matter. They do matter. There are so many correlations between the morality that someone practices in their personal life and their actions in their public life. There are so many correlations between the two. But whether you're talking about a political figure, any figure of power, any figure of prestige, a CEO, a basketball player, football player, anybody. There is a huge correlation between what you practice in your public life and what you do, or what you practice in your private life and what you do on the public scene. And a lot of people would look at this and they would say, well, if there really is a God, why is all this crud going on? You know, it's just so bad. It's so horrible. It's so evil. Why would a good God let all of this stuff happen? It's a big question. It's a huge question. It's a question that's constantly asked over and over and over and over again. I'm not going to go fully into it right now because I actually have an entire talk that I'm going to devote to that, the problem of evil. But what I want to do is I want to say that God is not slow, okay? He's not up there twiddling his thumbs. You have to understand that first and foremost, God is a loving father. And what loving father wants to be separated forever from their child? I mean, what father really wants to be separated forever from their children? I mean, just hates their children so much that they don't want anything to do with them. I'm talking about forever. Yeah, there are some people that fall out of contact, of course. My wife and her dad, they fell out of contact for quite some time. But it's not the ideal situation. It's not something that they wanted to happen. It's something that happened because there was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, things like that. God is patient. He's permitting things that go on, and yeah, there are horrible atrocities that go on. But again, we just talked about free will. People commit these horrible atrocities.